Well, I gotta admit, I'm kinda confused about my calling. I just got finished watching, I hope I'm saying the last name right, Pastor Stephen Furtick. Is it Furtick? Pastor Stephen Furtick. And he was saying that you're wondering what your calling is. Yes, I am. I'm wondering what my calling is. I'm wondering what my calling is. I know I have certain desires in my heart. I like to make sure that they're not just my own desires. Because if they're my own desires, they just will never come to pass. Because they're my own desires. They have to be God's desires. The only way that those things are going to come to pass, the only way that they're going to happen that I know of, they will not happen. These things will never come to pass. They are not God's desires. If they're only my own desires, they will never happen simply because they're not God's desires. And so I realize this truth. It has to be God's desires. It has to be God's desires. So I get this right. It has to be God's desires. Because if they're my own desires, they will never come to pass. It will never happen simply because it's not God's desires, it's my desires. So if it's my desires, it will never come to pass unless they are God's desires. And I have certain desires, but what I'd like to know is, are they my own desires or are they God's desires for me in my life? Because if they're God's desires for me in my life, they will come true. They will come to pass according to whatever God's will is. I know this. And I have these certain desires. But the reason I'd like to know if they're God's desires, because I would like them to come to pass. I would like those certain desires to come to pass. But I know that if they're not God's desires, they will not come to pass. Not unless they are God's desires. And that's why I'd like to know, are they God's desires or my desires? And if there's anyone on the other side that can help me to figure this truth out, help me if he can to know, are these my own desires or are these God's desires? Because if they're my own desires, they will never happen because they're my own desires and they're not God's desires. And so I'd like to know, because if they are God's desires, I know they come to pass because they're God's desires. And I desire these things, but they have to be God's desires if they're going to come to pass. They have to be God's desires for me in my life. And that's why I'm so intrigued, or I'm so, I would like to know if these are my desires or God's desires. Because then, if I know that they are God's desires and not my desires, I know I'll have better peace of mind knowing that these things will come to pass because they're not my desires, they're God's desires. I'm hoping that those desires I have in my heart, I'm hoping that they're God's desires because I would really like them to happen. I would really like them to happen for myself. But the only way that they can happen is it has to be God's desires. If they're not God's desires, they will not happen. And the other shocking thing I learned, and I pretty well could imagine, yes, it's true. If they're not really your desires, you're not going to be happy. And I believe that. I believe, if they're not really my desires, I believe that I won't be happy if they're not my desires. I mean, I've been through that. I've had the experience. Things that I thought would make me happy and don't make me happy. See, I thought they would make me happy, but then now I realize those things I thought would make me happy don't even make me happy. So I admit I try things my way. And what I found is when I do things my way, it just doesn't work. But now I can see that if I do things the God's way, they will work. I mean, if I do what I think will make me happy, what will really happen in the end is I will be very unhappy. If I do the things that I think will make me happy, then I will be, the truth is, I will be very unhappy. So I know now that, whereas if I do the things that God would like me to do and I do His will for me in my life, doing God's will, I know that's going to make me happy. And I have certain desires in my heart. And I'm hoping that they are God's desires because I desire them. But the thing is, if they're not God's desires, they're just not going to happen unless they are God's desires for me in my life. If those things I desire are not God's desires, they just won't happen simply because they are not God's desires for me in my life. They must be God's desires for me in my life. If they're just my desires, they will never come to pass. And okay, for the sake of argument, let's say that my desires did come to pass, and I was able to do my desires. I would be happy for a season. Then after that, I'd be very unhappy and regret that no way should never ever happened. So I'm better off at them doing God's desires anyways, because if I do my own desires, I will be very unhappy. At least if I'm doing God's desires, this way I know I'm going to be very happy if I'm doing God's desires. And that's why I would like to know is, are those desires in my heart? Did God plan those desires in my heart?
It's going to be like lawlessness. But he's the president.